Welcome to The Nameless. This story is not for everyone, but if you're still here, take a deep breath. Let's begin. Their hymns sound like screams when played backward. I know that sounds like the start of some bad urban legend or a creepypasta you'd read on a forum at 3 in the morning, but I have the file on my laptop right now. I haven't opened it in 6 months. I can't. Every time I see that waveform on the screen, just the visual representation of the sound, my stomach drops and my hands start to shake. It's not just the noise. It's the memory of where I recorded it. It's the memory of the smell of damp rot and old wood, and the feeling of 100 eyes on me from the tree line. I tried to show the police the location on Google Earth, but there was nothing there. Just a solid canopy of green. I tried to show them my paper map, the one I had marked up with a red Sharpie, but the trail I had drawn didn't line up with reality anymore. That's the thing about the deep woods. You think you know where you are until the trees decide you don't. This happened last October. I'm a freelance photographer, and I've made a decent niche for myself taking shots of abandoned infrastructure in the Pacific Northwest. Old mills, fire lookouts, bridges that lead to nowhere. It pays the bills, and I enjoy the solitude. I had rented a small A-frame cabin about 40 miles out from the nearest town, deep in the Cascade foothills. The plan was to stay for a week, scout the surrounding 10 miles, and hopefully find some old logging camps that had been reclaimed by the moss. The first 3 days were perfect. It was overcast, that flat, gray light that makes green pop on camera. I found an old truck chassis rusting in a creek bed and a collapsed shack that looked like it hadn't been touched since the 70s. On the 4th day, I decided to push further east. My GPS was spotty, which wasn't unusual, so I was relying on a topographic map and a compass. I'm not a novice hiker. I know how to navigate. I was following a deer trail that wound up a ridge, looking for a vantage point to get a landscape shot of the valley. Around noon, the atmosphere changed. You know that feeling when the air pressure drops right before a storm? It was like that, but heavy. The sounds of the forest, the birds, the wind in the hemlocks, the squirrels, just stopped. It was a vacuum of silence. I kept walking, mostly because I wanted to see what was causing the quiet. I crested a small hill and looked down into a depression, a sort of natural bowl in the landscape that shouldn't have been there. In the center of the clearing stood a church. It wasn't a ruin. That was the first thing that threw me off. Usually anything out here is half-eaten by termites and covered in blackberry bushes. This building was pristine. It was white, painted wood, with a sharp, steep steeple that poked up towards the gray sky. It looked like something out of a Little House on the Prairie episode, except for the windows. They were black. Not dark because the lights were off, but painted over from the inside. I checked my map. Nothing. I checked my GPS. No signal. just the searching icon spinning in the corner. I took my camera out, swapping the lens for a telephoto. Through the viewfinder, the details were sharper and stranger. The grass around the church wasn't overgrown. It was cut, perfectly manicured. But there were no roads leading to this place, no tire tracks, no footpaths, just this immaculate white building sitting in a bowl of silence. I should have turned around. I should have taken a picture from the ridge and hiked back to my car. But the silence was broken by a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. Singing. It started low, a hum that seemed to vibrate the ground under my boots. It grew louder, swelling into a harmony that was almost beautiful. It sounded like a choir, dozens of voices blending together. It was a hymn, I was sure of it. I couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was religious, slow and melodic. I wanted to get closer. It felt like a physical pull, a hook in my chest dragging me down the slope. I made my way down through the brush, trying to be quiet, though the singing was loud enough to cover the sound of my footsteps. I got within 50 yards of the structure. The singing was coming from inside, muffled by the wood and the blacked-out windows. It was hypnotic. I pulled out my phone, not my camera, but my phone, and started a voice memo. I wanted to capture the audio. As soon as I hit record, the singing stopped. It didn't fade out, it cut off. 1 second, a full choir. The next, dead silence. I froze. I was crouching behind a large fern, my heart hammering against my ribs. I waited for a door to open, for someone to come out and yell at me for trespassing. But nothing moved. The building just sat there, white and stark against the dark green of the trees. I stayed there for 10 minutes, my legs cramping. Nothing happened. Eventually, the creep factor outweighed my curiosity. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the church until I was back over the ridge. Then I turned and hiked back to the cabin at a pace that was just shy of a run. When I got back to my rental, I locked the door. I poured myself a drink and sat by the wood stove, trying to rationalize it. It was probably a private sect, some group that bought land and wanted to be left alone. Maybe they hiked in. Maybe there was a road I missed. I played the recording on my phone. It was just static at first, the sound of the wind that hadn't been there. Then the singing. It sounded okay. On the recording, it sounded a bit tinny, a bit distant, but it was definitely a choir. It didn't sound threatening. It sounded peaceful. I listened to it 3 or 4 times. I convinced myself I had overreacted. It was just a church. That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence of the cabin felt different than the nights before. It felt like the silence in that valley. Around 2 a.m., I woke up. I hadn't realized I'd fallen asleep. I was lying in the loft bedroom, staring at the ceiling. I had the overwhelming sensation that I needed to go back. It wasn't a rational thought. It was an itch in my brain. I needed to see the church at night. I know how stupid that sounds. If you were watching this in a movie, you'd be yelling at the screen. But I wasn't thinking clearly. It felt like I was sleepwalking while fully awake. I got dressed, grabbed my flashlight and my camera, and headed out. The hike back was a nightmare. The woods at night are a different world. Shadows stretched and warped in my flashlight beam. I kept tripping over roots I swear hadn't been there during the day. But I found the ridge. I knew exactly where to go. I reached the overlook and killed my light. The church was glowing. It wasn't light coming from the windows. The black paint stopped any light from escaping. The glow was coming from the ground around it. A ring of faint, sickly yellow light, like bioluminescent fungi, circled the foundation. And there were people. I laid on my stomach in the dirt, looking through my camera lens. There were at least 30 of them. They were standing in a perfect circle around the building, facing outward, towards the trees, towards me. They weren't wearing robes. They were wearing normal clothes, jeans, flannels, windbreakers. They looked like hikers. They looked like locals. They looked like me. But they weren't moving. They were standing perfectly rigid, arms at their sides. Then the singing started again. In the dark, it didn't sound peaceful. It sounded desperate. It was the same melody, the same harmony, but the tone was wrong. It was too loud. It projected too far. I watched the figures through the zoom lens. Their mouths were open, wide, unhinged like snakes. But they weren't taking breaths. They were just emitting this continuous, rolling sound without pausing for air. I zoomed in on the closest one, a man in a blue vest. His eyes were wide open, staring into the dark. He wasn't blinking. Tears were streaming down his face, glistening in that weird yellow ground light. He looked terrified. His mouth was open, producing that beautiful melodic note, but his expression was one of pure, abject horror. It looked like he was screaming, but the sound coming out was a hymn. Then the circle moved. They didn't walk, they didn't step, they just shifted. 1 second they were facing the trees, the next they had all rotated 10 degrees to the left without lifting their feet. It was mechanical, jerky, like a stop-motion animation with frames missing. They rotated again and again. They were spinning slowly around the church, faster and faster, while that continuous, breathless singing grew louder. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the camera. I snapped a few photos, the shutter sounding like a gunshot in the night. At the sound of the shutter, the singing stopped. Instantly. 30 pairs of eyes snapped toward my location on the ridge. They didn't turn their heads. Their heads remained forward, but their eyes rolled in their sockets, locking onto me in the darkness. Then, the man in the blue vest, the one who had been crying, smiled. It wasn't a smile. It was a stretching of skin. His jaw hung loose, but the corners of his lips pulled up until the skin on his cheeks turned white. He took a step toward the ridge, then another. Then the whole circle broke. They didn't run, they scrambled. They dropped to all fours, moving with a fluid, spider-like speed that human anatomy shouldn't allow. They were coming up the hill. I didn't wait. I scrambled backward, sliding down the other side of the ridge. I didn't use my flashlight. I didn't care about the roots or the holes. I ran blindly through the pitch black, crashing through rhododendron bushes, tearing my clothes, scraping my face. I could hear them behind me, not footsteps. I heard the rustling of fabric and the soft, wet sound of hands slapping against the dirt. And I heard the humming, low, buzzing, right behind my ears. I ran until my lungs burned. I ran until I hit the gravel road where my car was parked, a mile from the cabin. I didn't go back for my stuff. I didn't go back for my clothes. I had my keys in my pocket. I unlocked the car, threw myself in, and peeled out. I drove 80 miles an hour down a logging road, praying I wouldn't hit a deer or slide off a cliff. I didn't stop until I hit the interstate. I didn't sleep until I was back in Portland. I never went back for my gear. The rental company charged me for the extra days and the cleaning fee for leaving the place a mess. I paid it without complaint. I developed the photos a week later. They were all black. Every single one. Even with the high ISO, even with the weird ground light, nothing came out. Just black frames. But I still had the audio recording on my phone, the one from the first day. I sat in my apartment, lights on, door locked. I uploaded the file to my computer. I wanted to prove to myself that I hadn't lost my mind. I wanted to hear the hymn and tell myself it was just a weird cult, that the scrambling on all fours was a hallucination born of panic. I opened the audio software. I saw the waveform. It looked normal. I played it. The choir sang. It sounded eerie but human. Then, by accident, or maybe just morbid curiosity, I clicked the reverse effect. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was looking for hidden messages. Maybe I just wanted to deconstruct the sound. When I played it backward, the melody disappeared. The harmony dissolved. What was left was the raw audio of 30 people screaming. It wasn't a chant. It wasn't gibberish. It was English. Help us. It hurts. Make it stop. Oh God, it burns. Let us go. The man in the blue vest. I heard his voice distinctly. He wasn't singing a hymn. He was screaming for his life. The hymn was just the sound of their screams reversed and layered to sound like music to anyone listening from the outside. I deleted the software. I tried to delete the file, but I couldn't bring myself to empty the trash bin. It's still there, buried in a folder on an external hard drive. I looked up missing persons reports for that county. There are dozens. Hikers, campers, drifters, people who went into the woods and vanished. The police say it's the terrain. They say it's the exposure. But I know what it is. Sometimes when I'm driving alone at night, or when I'm in a quiet room, I hear a faint humming. It's just on the edge of my hearing. I check the rearview mirror, expecting to see a white church standing on the side of the highway, expecting to see a man in a blue vest crawling on the pavement behind my car. I don't go into the woods anymore. And if you're ever hiking and the forest goes quiet and you hear beautiful singing coming from nowhere, don't listen. Run. Run before the song stops, because once it stops, they start to feed.